Welcome to it, everybody. Another episode of The Wave. I believe this is gonna be, oh shit, I should have looked this up. Well, now we're stalling. How you doing, players? Happy holidays. I know I'm still shopping for Christmas. I assume the degenerates that watch this program are probably in the same category, so best of luck. We are on episode 88 of The Weekly Wave. My guest this week is Mr. Mike Basch. He is an entrepreneur in every sense of the word. He is also a videographer and a kicker of much ass. Without further ado, Mike Basch. But it's so crazy the way that you get adjusted to your nutritional habits in a way that, you know, people don't consider Advil or your morning supplements or whatever that's going to be. Like, a big one to me is creatine. I have so many friends that were, they were athletes in high school, they were athletes in college. Now they work in an office, but they still do creatine like they're trying to put on muscle mass, like they're going to the Olympics. And It's like, guys, you're going to end up deficient in these things in the long term. And to take something like caffeine, where we all have like you smell it in the morning, your body's like, okay, time to wake up and take a shit. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like it's so aggressive to get out of bed and go that way.
Yeah, I understand. I also realize, for a lot of people, it's more routine based, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which routines. I mean, I watched my dad for, I don't know, however long. Just he woke up every morning without an alarm clock between 4:20 and 4:25 without an alarm.
That's epic.
Literally, and he did really well. He started a company, and he didn't have to be the first one there, but it was part of his life. He wanted to be the one that unlocked the door in the morning, and he was going to get all of his emails done before everybody else came in. So literally, my dad was at work for an hour and a half before anybody else came, and
Doing
that was
what?
his story. So in 1988, we moved here, the year I was born. And my dad and 4 or 5 people, they started a company called PL Marketing. It stands for private label marketing. And I don't know exactly what they do, but more or less they work with Kroger, and they do a lot of Kroger store brand products.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, a lot of people will hire PL Marketing because Kroger has this. They have such a good relationship with Kroger to basically use PL to to get into Kroger stores, right? So say you manufacture a trail mix. In order for you to get into Kroger store, another product likely has to come out. It's very competitive to get in Kroger.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize that it's a science. Literally, when I walk into Kroger, they know exactly what you're buying.
Yeah.
When I walk in, they know I'm buying sparkling water, natural peanut butter. They know. So at PL Marketing's headquarters, they have a fake. I don't know if this is top secret, but they have a fake Kroger store. It's a mock Kroger store, and it's a science. They send people through, and the bags of cheese, they look exactly like cheese, but it's shredded paper.
Yeah.
And they
just to work on customer experience.
Literally, and eye levels, right? So where a product is on a shelf, it's purchased more often. There's end caps. It's a science, dude.
Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful particularity. And Costco's a nice example because they have that 1,000 product cap or whatever it is. Versus Kroger, you don't realize that there is a hard ceiling on what is good for them and what is not. And I'm pretty sure one of the things that blew Kroger up back in the 80s and 90s is the fact that they were coming out with more customer evaluation, customer experience, quality stuff, and starting to get to know what can we predict that our customers are going to buy. The first person in that field has such a crazy advantage on the emotional concerns of your customer.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of companies in town that are, Kroger's a monster. I think they're the 5th or 6th largest retailer, and I think they're larger than Target. I think they're larger than Home Depot. I mean, if we pull it up right now, smaller than Walmart and smaller than Amazon. But they are a top 5 or 6 retailer in the United States.
That's crazy.
They're huge.
Is that including all the subsidiaries like Publix and things like
Correct.
that? Okay.
Obviously, you can use your Kroger Plus card. You go to Los Angeles and use your Kroger Plus card.
At a Publix?
Correct.
Yeah.
And so it's a monster company. And then obviously because it's a large, the great white shark that's got the little shark swimming next to it. And so you've got 8451, which used to be Dunnhumby. I think they do multiple things, but a lot of what they do is, when you check out at Kroger, you get a receipt, and on the back of that receipt is an item typically that you buy. So they'll give you a coupon when you check out. They'll say, hey, here's, you got X amount of fuel points, and then they give you for me, I always get Perrier coupons, and so they literally track what you buy. And that's 8451's job, is to keep track of what people are buying, so that but Kroger is a monster company. People
Yeah.
don't realize like how many people in town either directly or indirectly work for Kroger.
Yeah, the indirect thing is it's odd to consider how many companies can feed off of one megalith's needs in a
Sure.
market like that. Not only their data saving, but the person who shreds Kroger's paper has a lifetime of work to do. You know
Totally.
what I mean? Like
Yep.
it's crazy to think how much one Fortune 500 company can take a city to that next level and
Yeah.
give way to those
Well,
things.
not even they're probably Fortune, they're
Fortune 10, yeah.
Fortune 10. They're a monster.
Big money, dog.
Yeah, I mean, the people that supply floor mats for them, whether it be Centos or the people that even supply just the glazing for their pastry. Like Kroger, especially this time of year, you go to Kroger right now, it's going to be a miserable experience.
Yeah.
There's just people everywhere. But so yeah, my dad came here and started a company. He had previously worked at an actual Kroger store, and somebody recruited him. He's actually a family friend now. The gentleman who recruited him, his grandpa used to be the chairman of Kroger. Very well-to-do family. We moved here for that, and so long story short, we came here. There was like 4 or 5 guys. It's kind of like, have you seen Wolf of Wall Street? I mean, when they start in that little that little garage, and now they have a massive downtown. It's actually in Newport, Kentucky. They have a big facility, and hundreds and hundreds of people that work for them.
And he was there from the very
Like,
big.
I think there was 4 people.
Did
when
you say he
started.
moved for that? No, he got recruited from.
Correct.
Okay.
So he and I guess I won't name, but the original. He was one of the original people that worked there, and he worked there until about 5 years ago. He retired,
Yeah.
and it's kind of funny. I was kind of like a black sheep, and I always have been in terms of growing up. And it's part of what I'd love to talk about today is I feel like, and maybe you agree, is I feel like I'm very passionate about just some of the shortcomings of the education system in the United States. Just like, have you ever seen Dirty Jobs with Mike Grell?
Yeah.
It's an awesome show, and actually, I guess some new episodes just came out. I think they're starting a new season, but what that show has taught me is that, a lot of the things they're teaching kids in school and a lot of the things that, we think kids are going to do aren't at all what they should be learning or doing. And so he's actually testified in front of Congress a few times about what they call a skills gap in the United States. So say there's 2 million jobs that are open and there are a million people that are unemployed. The problem is these million people don't have the skills to do the 2 million jobs. And that's what's happening because, when I went to a high school, went private school similar to you, where it's like, you got some guidance counselor making, $41,000 telling you what to do with your life, and they don't know that, I do now because I'm in construction, but they don't know that if you go to a trade school and get your fire license, to fit fire sprinklers in buildings, you're filthy rich. Granted, you got to work hard for it, but there's only so many companies in town doing fire sprinkler and fire suppression. But my guidance counselor didn't even know, that a blacksmith, we'll get into more of it, but I got a staircase coming in on a crane for a building I'm renovating in over the Rhine.
Yeah.
That we paid, $45,000 for it, right? And this guy's making 2 and 3 of them at one time, and it's like this kid that, when I was 18 years old, I would have looked at and said, "Oh, what a loser."
Yeah.
And now he's got no college debt, right? He's paid cash for his house. And that's kind of what Dirty Jobs is about. Is there's a lot of these real quiet millionaires that just kind of went about it a different way.
Yeah. Well, it's cool to be in. Sometimes we try just to separate the workforce into blue collar and white collar. And I think, if you go to a standardized kind of school system, it's a hierarchy. You learn to play that game very well. So that kind of implication says, okay, go into a structure where you have this kind of a thing. We're going to be working in an office just like a classroom with 25 people. You're going to have your own projects. You're going to report to the same person. That's just going to go upstream, and that's your life. And most people, you can't say most people, but a lot of people don't find that necessarily fulfilling. Some people are task-oriented in the way that's not only working with your hands, but seeing a project as what it could be, not what it is right now.
Sure.
Eventually we'll hop into some of these projects that you sent me.
Yeah.
And what's kind of blown my mind is I understand less and less of who you are the more I look at this stuff.
Yeah.
But really what it seems like you are is a visionary type, someone that likes to look at something and see what it could be,
Sure.
and then backtrack how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
And that's a different type of advanced critical thinking problem solving that a guidance counselor wouldn't say, hey, that's a career path. No, it is a career path.
Yeah.
You can do so many wacky things with that, whether it's your dream wedding or this apartment complex or whatever's going to be your
Yeah.
next project. Like,
Yeah, I was have to send you the highlight film from the wedding. I just finished it last night.
Yeah.
It turned out really cool. But so yeah, I mean, my life is kind of strange in terms of grew up in I guess, an upper middle class family. Had an awesome childhood. My parents are now divorced when I was 20, my freshman or sophomore year in college. But I had an ideal childhood. I'm one of 4 kids. I have an older brother, older sister, and a younger sister. We all went to private school, all had everything we ever needed. Not to the point where we were spoiled, but if I wanted to quit baseball and play lacrosse, next thing I knew, I had lacrosse equipment.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate growing up, and I was around a dad and mother. My dad was a work machine. My dad's an amazing man, and it's one of those things where you don't realize until you get a little bit older, like how awesome. Now that I've turned out good and my brother's turned out well, and my sister's a PhD psychologist, and my other sister runs a nurse. She's a nurse. She runs a heart floor down in Florida. Like, now that all of his kids have like turned out well, he's become like an amazing, just like a supporter and friend.
Yeah.
Like he knows nothing about construction, but like he brings his buddies to my building, and like he's proud.
Yeah.
And
And you get to share that with him.
Totally.
He's fostered a relationship where
Yeah.
you didn't have just to be a son. You could be a
Yeah.
buddy. You could be a friend that he looks up to.
Totally, and so I've noticed that our relationship has gotten much better the older that I've gotten, and the older that he's gotten. But yeah, so I guess I kind of have a strange story. I went to private school. I was a lacrosse player. Lacrosse was like my main passion growing up, and I actually went to Mount St. Joe. I played lacrosse in college.
Nice.
And I'll be honest, I used to have a lot of anxiety when I was like 18, 19, 20. I grew up with a successful dad, but I used to look at people that were successful, and I used to really wonder how, if you work for XYZ company, what separates the people that, kind of rise to the top and the people that don't? And I used to I used to have a lot of misunderstanding about just like thinking that sometimes people just would catch a break. And certainly that has happened, right? And that does happen. But I think I underestimated when I was younger, like how the same work ethic that allowed me to succeed and be one of the best athletes on sports teams, a lot of that would hopefully continue and help me separate in entrepreneurship or just in work life as well.
Yeah.
And so went to college, studied communications, graduated with a degree. I got hurt a lot in college, unfortunately, so I had a bunch of knee surgeries, and in my college lacrosse career didn't really go the way I wanted it to go. But I caught this super weird break where I was like 22 years old, living at home after college, and I was going to go on a vacation with my family to Italy. It was our first like crazy vacation we ever went on.
Yeah.
And before I went, I got really interested in the idea of making a film of my trip. So I was like, at night, I was on Vimeo and YouTube, and I found this guy. His name was Steven, and he was in the Navy maybe, but he was stationed in Hawaii. And what he would do is he would go around the Hawaiian Islands and just make these little day trips of his station, where he was stationed. And he took this little camera, and he would make these super cool films just of stuff he would do. And I remember seeing this and being like, man, that's like such a cool hobby. Like, this guy is got all these cool videos to look back at and like remember times in his life and who he was hanging out with. And so I got obsessed with the idea of making a film. I bought a little Sony RX100.
And what year is this?
Let's see here. I'm 34 years old. So this would have been 13 years ago.
Cool.
Maybe 10 years ago. Maybe I was a little bit older than I think, because I filmed my first wedding 9 years ago, I believe. So I went to Italy, made this little goofy video, which for a beginner maybe was like a good video. And this girl saw it on my Facebook and was like, hey, would you want to film my wedding? And honestly, dude, I knew nothing about weddings. I knew nothing about wedding films. So shout out Jacqueline and Chris. It's my first wedding. And it's funny, I joke a lot. There's a photographer, a really well-to-do photographer that I work with a lot. That was the photographer that day. And we both kind of joke about like, I literally had no idea what I was doing. I had this like little seed I brought with me that I read online was like, you should bring like, and so anyway, I'm a believer that you learn stuff by doing it.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't go to film school. You know, maybe I should have, but you know, 9 years later, I'm running a very well established, profitable a business that I love doing. I've developed a lot of skill. I've collected some great memories. The crazy thing is like 3 years later, I got hired to go back to Italy to film somebody's wedding. And so it was like so full circle.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah,
cool.
and I was like, man, like I came here 2 years ago, and it was like a mile from where I came. You know, I was on the Amalfi Coast in Italy, and I had a really, really like a really high end client here that took me with them, and they're an awesome family that I've become really good friends with. But it was actually, have you been to Jungle Gyms?
Yeah.
So it was Jim's daughter.
That's
Yeah.
okay. So that explains why we go into the
Yeah,
mafia.
yeah.
You know, it's like, but what a crazy thing to find your passion, or a passion. You know, you'd had others before, but this new lens, you know, a literal
Totally.
sense for life, out of nowhere, out
Yeah.
of a whim, just being like, that's a family vacation. I want to make this shit awesome.
Yeah, it was a total hobby, right? And that's what you want, right? You know, I don't have kids, and I hope to have kids one day. But like, the dream is to like have a kid that somehow has an interest that could become lucrative one day,
Yeah.
right? You know, and I had a lot of anxiety when I was like 21, 22, 23. You know, I was just kind of in this weird spot where I wasn't really interested in what my dad was doing. My mom was a nurse, so like I didn't go to nursing school, so like that was
Yeah.
out of the question.
My fiance's a nurse. If you hear from a loved one of what they go through, you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, never mind. No, no thanks.
Totally. So my mom's a nurse. My sister ended up doing that as well, and I was in a weird spot where I knew I had a lot of connections. I knew I spoke well, and I feel like I just kind of started going through like, well, you know, what am I gonna do? You know, but this is important. You know, part of what I wanted to talk to today is I feel like I was young entrepreneurial DNA when I was younger, and so I don't want to incriminate myself, but when I was in high school, I actually ran a liquor business. So,
Nice.
Yeah, so like I can get into the whole spiel of I made
Yeah.
tens of thousands of dollars in high school.
Tens of thousands
Yeah.
of dollars.
So you have a studio here.
Yes.
I used to record music, so I play guitar.
Yeah.
I used to record music when I was younger, and I bought all the stuff I had going on these liquor runs. Yeah, and so long story short, you know, we used to make IDs, and I was entrepreneurial, all right?
Dude,
And so
yeah.
I had a whole group of buddies. We made IDs, and there was like 3 or 4 of us. And what we realized is that there was like a demand for booze, right?
Yeah.
And so I actually don't drink anymore and haven't for a really long time. But I would send a message to a group of people I knew, and they would send, you know, primarily it was the school I went to.
Yeah.
And they would send a message, and then we would drive down to this store. It was in Kentucky. And we went there so much that they actually put us on what's called a house account. So similar to like what a restaurant does, right?
No.
Literally, dude.
No.
Swear to God.
How many bottles of Smirnoff Ice you moving?
Lots of Bacardi Raz, lots of Smirnoff, lots
Some
of
Kamchakas?
Yeah, literally. So we would go there, you know. And this was hilarious because I had the coolest parents in the world. So it was like we had just like a train of kids coming to my house to drop off 20s and whatever.
Yeah.
And
And
so
your parents just thought you were popular?
no, my parents knew. My parents were super cool,
Okay.
and I'll get into more of that.
Yeah.
But my parents knew like I was getting stuff done, had good grades, was a good athlete, and they're just like, man, like it's working.
Yeah.
just leave him alone.
Hands off.
Yeah, hands up. And so, so anyway, I would run to Kentucky. I'd buy this store still there. I'm not going to name it, but
Yeah, don't.
yeah, I'd buy the booze, and we'd come back, and then for like the next hour and a half, or whether I'd just take it to a party that night. You know, and look, we weren't like charging outrageous prices, but it was A, Kentucky, right? So it was cheaper per bottle.
Yeah.
B, we were on a house account. And so, like, you know, what would have been a $19 bottle is a $14 bottle us. And so by going and buying 20 and 30 bottles, which wasn't unrealistic, especially on like New Year's,
Yeah.
we would make like $250, $300 just to go to Kentucky and back.
And you're talking about economies of scale, then most people don't learn what that is until they're in college, and it's only a textbook. Versus you're in high school saying, okay, if you buy more from the wholesaler and then you're selling to individuals at these rates, like it's a fair transaction, but that's how
100%.
you get ahead of the game. You
No
know?
question. Yeah. And then, again, like they would have, you know, stood outside of a gas station and begged some person they didn't know. But like,
Yeah.
again, we were charging like, you know, it wasn't like an outrageous price we were charging, but it was because we were A, going there and buying so much, B, we were on a house account. You know, it kind of had a lot of the similar looks of what a normal business looks like. You know,
Yeah.
you go in and get a cheeseburger at a restaurant, you don't really feel like you're getting ripped off. There's profit to be made there, but it's because they're buying a big bulk of meat and a lot of buns, and it works, right?
Yeah.
And so that
Well,
was my first like legitimate business.
answer me this: as a young kid doing that, how much of an entrepreneurial attitude would you say is confidence?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so I have a firm believer that like I have made it, and I faked it until I made it so many times in life. It's unreal. Like,
Yeah.
we'll get into how I got into real estate here in a little bit, but like, um, I feel like the problem with our education system is it seems like they are teaching kids just to study this information, to retain this knowledge, to get a good grade on a test, so that somebody will hire you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's like, I feel like we missed everything in school, right? We missed, um, the amount of time I spent learning about parallelograms, right? And didn't learn anything about how to file an LLC in the state of Ohio, about how a mortgage works, right?
Yeah.
Like how does
How
it
to accurately expense your business, how to get all those numbers off your books so that you can tell what your real profit is.
totally? Yeah.
That's a scary thing for a small business. That why do most of these things fail? Because these people aren't informed
Yeah,
well.
but I know all about isosceles triangles and all this, this crap, right? That my parents were paying a bunch of money, and so, we can get into more of that. But I feel like what I'm getting at is there are certain people in life, and some people, I don't know who listens to this, but people might have children or like there are people that you could identify as at a young age as maybe like entrepreneurial DNA, right?
Mhm.
Somebody that they're 11 years old and they want to buy some shoes and they're willing to go cut the neighbor's grass. Like that might be a kid that has it, right? That might be a kid. Only problem is my business was illegal, right? When I was young, but it had the lookings of a business, right? I
Yeah.
had like a call log, and I had, I was collecting money and and then I knew how much the bottles were and how much I had to charge, and
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna go into jail after this podcast.
No,
but-
what's statute of limitations
Yeah,
on
I
that?
think we're
Yeah,
past it.
you're probably good. But it's so crazy to see a serviceable market as a kid, and like we're talking about maybe two people on different routes of how you get there. Like I was playing guitar and I loved playing music, and I started to provide that to people that wanted that service. So you find your customers. First, if you're already sitting around your customers, you just say, "What can I sell to these people?"
Sure.
It's like that's why you're selling to your peers, and that's why they respect you for that kind of line of business.
Never really thought about that, like being around your client and finding a business versus having a business and trying to find the client. That's wow.
When I was probably a junior at Xavier studying marketing and entrepreneurship. When I got into class for the first time, and they were like, "Okay, you need to ask your customer what they want, and then you need to start to build a product for what they want." And you realize that half the class, maybe 70%, falls off right then and there because it's so hard to accurately get somebody to tell you what they want.
Yeah.
Like we all have ideas of what we want. Part of a good marketer or a psychologist is to get people to paint that picture well. But the actual question of what do they need and what are they willing to pay for is hard to get to. But if you find it and you start cracking at it,
Yeah.
it feels good. It's fulfilling, man.
Yeah, especially when you're doing something that you like doing, right?
Yeah.
You love playing music.
Yeah, or you love being around your friends in a good party environment.
Yeah.
It's like these are positive things. Like so many DJs are like that too.
Yeah.
Where it's like someone's got to spin tunes tonight.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm gonna do it on an iPod, and then they get a Pioneer set up,
Yeah.
and then they're bumping up there because they got money now.
I watch DJs at weddings, and I can tell they generally DJs have a little bit more passion for music than like because like when the music's playing, I can see that like they're like and I can see that like music was an interest for them, right? And they went and kind of found a way to make money on music.
Yeah.
But yeah. So long story short, I guess I've always just tried to kind of make a business out of things. So started filming weddings, saved up a couple bucks. Got to the age, right, where a year or two later, where it was like I was like living at home, and I knew that wasn't the spot to be, And so I started looking into buying something, and then again, my business sense kicked in, and I was like, man, well, how can I buy something but not pay for it, right? And so I started looking into buying like a duplex or buying a house and having my friends live with me.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, man, I'm 24, 25, like I don't really want to live with friends anymore. So my mind really kind of turned and started looking at multifamilies.
Mm-hmm.
So I started looking online at duplexes. Obviously I'd live in one half and rent out the other half, and we can kind of get into kind of how the financials working on that. But I randomly got lucky. I found a 4-family on Elm Street and Over the Rhine. This would have been in 2013, 2013 or 14. In May of 2014 is when I bought my first investment property. And it was a 4-family. And the reason why it was perfect for me at the time is A, I stole it from this dude. And then B, it was like half done. So it was like this guy started renovating it and then needed money for another project or something and sold it. And I knew nothing about construction, right? And so again, this is just kind of how crazy I am. Is I never even hung a cabinet. I never done tile. I've never done anything. But it was the perfect building in the sense that like I could have gotten in there and I actually had a couple units in it that were finished already.
Yeah.
They weren't finished to my liking, but I
they were
had
monetized.
literally had tenants in them, and so I was like, man, I bought the building for X amount, my mortgage was X amount, and I already had 2 tenants, paying tenants that covered my mortgage immediately. I was like, man, that worked. But then I had a 4th unit in the building that I was going to live in that needed everything. It needed floors, kitchen, So it was cool. I got to like basically start working on my unit and learning and making a space that I was happy with myself. And it's like I kind of multitasked a bunch of different things I wanted to learn how to do, I needed to do, and gained a bunch of experience and skill. And had like slowly worked on this one building. Kind of a long story, but this was so like now over the Rhine is expensive. Okay. Yeah. And, I bought my first building in 2013 or 14. I can't remember what it was. I paid $155,000 for a 4-family. Yeah.
I can't even imagine the size of a 4.
Yeah.
Is it a 4-story building?
So yeah, I mean, this building's probably altogether, it might be 3,500 square feet. It's got a storefront, and then my large apartment, which is now like a 3-level apartment, and then there's 2 apartments in the back that are on top of each other that are each probably like a 500, 600 square foot apartment.
Cool.
But I guess what I'm getting at is, it's kind of a crazy story, but the bank that I borrowed from, Forked Bank, which was a crazy story how I went to college with a girl whose dad worked at a bank, and I ended up borrowing money from him. Mm-hmm. The young guy had just started a business. They liked me. They wanted to lend to me. The problem is Forked Bank sent an appraiser from Lexington, Kentucky. It's a Kentucky bank. And so over the Rhine is an appraiser's nightmare because you got an $850,000 condo next to a abandoned building, right?
Yeah. So when does the appraiser come into this? Before you get the loan?
That's correct. So
when you ask, and then they send this out.
I think I agreed to pay like $165,000 or something for this building, and then the bank says, "Yeah, that's great. You can afford it, good credit, whatever. We'll give you the loan, but the final step is we need to make sure that it's worth what you're agreeing to pay." So they send the appraiser. He comes out and he looked at this 4-family and over the Rhine. I was actually pre-Rheingeist, I believe. So like I lived directly across the street from Rheingeist.
That's awesome.
So I got lucky, right?
Yeah.
So I was pre-Rheingeist. It was kind of a weird area, a lot of prostitution when I first lived there. I can get into all that, but like literally I would come home at night and each stop sign as I would go down Elm Street would be like a different prostitute dancing on the stops. It was weird.
Yeah. It's such a culture shock, man. And as someone that's just trying to look for a good opportunity, you also run into the moral conflicts of like, there's a lot of great things to be had in this world that have been mistreated for long amounts of time, and you come in here trying to do something positive, and that resistance to change starts to put you at risk in an odd way.
Yeah, and we can get into more of the the topic of gentrification, all that. The cool thing about every building I've ever done has been abandoned for literally like 5 years or more, so it's it's not like I'm buying buildings and kicking out families,
totally.
And we can get into more of that, but
that's me more the risk you put yourself at when you go into an abandoned building of 5 years. Like there probably is someone living there, and that person's probably in a pretty difficult situation. So your risk of them being violent or aggressive towards you is definitely there, and it's like your motivation to do well here while also doing good in the great community. There's some serious confliction moments that you can respect someone that says, all right, I know what the issue is with coming to this neighborhood, but I also know I'm doing something positive by taking a rust bucket that's falling apart, that's a risk to the neighborhood, and making something beautiful.
Yeah. And that's what I ended up getting into. But I bought the first bill. So the bank sent an appraiser from Lexington, Kentucky. He didn't really know a lot about the area, and so he missed on his appraisal pretty badly. I think he said the building was worth like $105,000, which was now kind of laughable to think that like for $105,000, people are selling shells down there for $300,000. Like literally a building that needs everything. It's just bricks. You're just buying bricks.
And in the space.
Correct. And the problem is banks won't let you do multiple appraisals anymore because things are much tighter. And so once he kind of assigned it a value of 105,000, I was kind of just stuck, right? I could either A, go to another bank and try to redo this process all again and hope that that appraisal comes back stronger, or B, reach out to the seller and try to just find a common ground between what he assigned the value at and where kind of we needed to be. So that's what I did. The guy's name was Sil. I still see him all the time at Lowe's. He's a property developer. And I reached out to him. I was like, hey, I'm 24 years old. I agree. The appraisal's bad. But, what I could do is maybe come out of pocket, maybe if you come down 10,000 or whatever on the price. I would literally went 50-50 with the bank on this first building. I went from what would have been okay, so whatever 20% of 150 is, right? Which is, I don't know, I suck at math, but
15,
yeah.
15 on top of 20, what, 35?
35,000.
Yeah.
So I would have gone to a 30, and then I ended up putting down, I don't know, almost half of. So he came down to
and that's all your wedding money.
Wedding money, yeah, and pretty much, yeah.
Staying at home, grinding your ass off, and now you're turning towards a totally different hobby.
Correct.
And you're about to put your whole life savings down on a missing building, not knowing any of this shit.
Correct. So got into my first building, and so he came down a little bit. But so here's the kicker: the fact that they missed so bad on that appraisal, it sucked at the time because I ended up putting down it was $50,000 or something on this down payment, but it ended up being a blessing because once I had lived in it and I started to fix stuff up and paint stuff and put a kitchen in my apartment, I then went back to the bank a year later, and I did basically an equity loan, right? I said, hey, this is my building, and I only have a loan on it for $82,000, and it ended up being worth $350 or whatever it was because his appraisal was way off. I did a bunch of work to it. And
so at that point, it was worth $350.
Correct.
It's worth way more than that now, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So anyway, I put a loan on that, right? And I took money out, and I went and I did another one. And the crazy thing was, I'll never forget, my dad literally, it's wild. It's because I remember meeting with general contractors when I started looking at buildings. For some reason, I was called to real estate. I was like, man, I'm supposed to do this. And so I started looking at buildings online, and I knew I had kind of started working on my building I was living in. But to take a building that was completely abandoned, right, and rebuild the whole thing, I had no idea what I was doing. Yeah. Literally no clue. But I thought it was cool, right? I thought it was super cool, and I thought it would be something I was interested in. And I remember I would call general contractors. There's a guy named Chris that I still see around. He has a company in Over the Rhine, and I called a couple contractors, and I originally thought, hey, I'll just buy a building and then hire them to do it for me. Until I started pricing it out, right? And it's expensive to do that. So, some of these general contractors, they might charge you, $220 a square foot or something, which when I found the building and then I found them and then the more I started thinking, I was like, man, why are they any different than me, right? Why can this guy, right, renovate a building? And this is the kind of person I am. Why can this guy go to Kentucky and buy a liquor? Why can, and so I got in, I said, hey, screw being a GC or hiring one. I'm going to be the GC.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, I found 1614 Main Street. It was an abandoned, I bought it on a Facebook message. This guy named Mike, he was a realtor. He messaged me. He said, hey, I got this building on Main Street. This guy's trying to get rid of it. And I know that guy too. He's awesome. He said he's trying to get rid of it. Would you be interested? And I was. I took the money from Elm Street to the second one, but I'll never forget, the night before I bought it, I remember my dad looking at me. He's like, you think you can do this? And it was a legitimate question. This building is huge, and it needed, it was horrible, right? It needed everything. It was dead raccoons in it. I mean, literally everything that could be wrong with the building was wrong with this, except for the rubber roof was pretty solid. Got into it, literally had buddies come over. It was the heat of the summer. It was 95 degrees. We're in there swinging sledgehammers. I never forget, I hit one board. My buddy Anderson will remember this. I hit a board. It came back, split my forehead open. I've got pictures in my Instagram of I had blood just coming down my face. But I was having a blast, right? I was not in an office, right? And I was enjoying learning something. And most importantly, I think I enjoy worrying if I can do I like being damn, this is this is scary. Like,
Yeah.
not there's if I feel like if you're not scared in life, right? If you're not doing something that like makes you nervous, then you're probably chilling. You're too, you know what I'm saying? You're not forcing yourself to where you need to be.
Well, I think there's a reward system that we've been given for the sake of survival that you found new tasks taps into. It's like there's a rush of the mind to say like, there you go again, pushing through what you told yourself you may not be able to do, and to do it with your hands and to see a physical output of it. Like, it's different for someone like me who's playing guitar and what's in the air is my tangible. It's the one real thing about it. But when you can walk through these spaces, when you can live in these spaces, you know, when you're out there with the sledgehammer and you take this shit out and you know where you're going next, like, man, what ecstasy of the mind and the heart to plow through that.
Yeah. I actually know several photographers, videographers that also dabble in real estate too. And so it seems like there's a part of the brain maybe that is good at design, that's good at color, that's good at envisioning something that is, you know, it's the same way when I sit down and I have all these video clips and drone shots and audio. The same way I can kind of assemble that into something that, you know, is worthwhile. Is the same way I can take a piece of shit building, right, and put it together.
Yeah.
Also,
But you also have taste in that. You know, if you learn all these tasks on your own rather than going through a schooling and being taught how to do something, you decide how you want to do it. And sometimes we look for practicalities of how we style things and how we do things. But your thumbprint, your vibe, you know, what is great about it is the fact that you teach yourself. You demand these things work. You make them happen in that.
Yeah, yeah. So got into doing, I bought that second building, and this was my first complete gut. Okay, like I learned everything, how to get a building permit, you know, how an architect works. You know, I knew nothing. How what the fire codes are and over the Rhine. You know, there's mezzanine codes where the mezzanine can only be a certain percentage of the square foot, the floor below it. I mean, literally, just one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, started figuring out like how this works.
Yeah.
Knew nothing about construction other than the fact that I had befriended a guy named James that was helping me to do a lot of work at where I was living.
Mm-hmm.
And so by watching him, you know, do drywall and watching him cut tile, I started figuring out, hey, like this is kind of how it works. And so started on this process and gutted that building, rebuilt the entire thing into a 3-family. And it's a badass building. I mean, the top floor of that has like 28-foot ceilings. It's this real fancy loft. I can show you some pictures of what it looks
I
like.
would love that.
But ended up turning out good. And, you know, we can get into it. But I guess there's a lot of confusion. And I didn't really know until I got into it. But just like, how does real estate investing work, right? So so the whole goal is to, you know, obviously I'm going to have a down payment. And then I'm going to probably have a mortgage that I carry. But obviously to make the rents you have coming in exceed those. Okay. So, there's a lot of expenses there, right? I have property tax and water bills and, you know, and so, but, you know, say you buy a building for, so that second one, I paid $84,000 for the shell. Okay. But
For the 3-family?
This is a 3-family as well. Yeah.
With the 28-foot ceilings?
Yep. Yeah.
Goddamn.
Yeah. So anyway, I bought this building. It was a total piece of shit. It needed everything. I paid $84,000, I think, for the shell, meaning just for bricks, more or less, and some beams that the floors we kept. But other than that, we tore out everything. Literally.
Is that what we're looking at in this?
So that's
Okay,
the
cool.
newest one. And I can tell you about how that works too. But so anyway, paid $84,000. I can't remember what the budget was to renovate it. To be totally honest, my budget at that time, I didn't know either. Like I would just find money and then I'd run out and I'd find money again. I think I initially had a loan it was a line of credit for like $150,000, and then I had to keep finding money.
Yeah.
But now like I have a business partner and like it's very precise. Like we know price per square foot, and we only know that now based upon like, you know, doing it.
Your own track record.
Correct.
Well, so what's it like when you're 2 buildings in? Your credit probably doesn't look as pretty as it could because you're taking some major risks, and you're still bumping into those walls. Like, was it your own push? Was it the push of your friends and family? Like, what got you through those hurdles?
Yeah. So that's a good question. So yeah, I think my credit was fine. I think banks were starting to identify that I was like a young hustler. They liked it.
Yeah.
You know, banks want to lend money, right? Yeah. They want to lend money because that's how they make money. But they don't want to lend money recklessly. They want to lend money to somebody that they think, you know, can and will pay the loan back.
Yeah. And make them a little bit money doing that, but they don't want to see you
Correct.
in that accounts payable.
Yeah. So obviously it's very important. So my dad at one point was a silent cosigner on my business. He wouldn't give me any money, but what he would do is he would, if I needed him to,
Vouch for you.
he would be on my loan with me. And that helped, right? Because he had strong income. He had been at where he was working for decades and banks like that. I was 24 years old, self-employed. I made it work, but like banks don't love a 24-year-old self-employed kid. They just don't love it.
Yeah.
They do now because I've been doing it for longer and I know what I'm doing. But it's kind of crazy. Like I used to work for, it seemed like months to get a loan, and now like Stu will send a banker like hey, we're thinking about buying this building, and like it's like we get like an approval letter in like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, and
What'd you call it with the liquor store?
Yeah.
You had an account?
yeah, a house account.
Exactly. Like they feel good about when you walk in because they've known you've done that business. But how many out of 50 are going to be successful loans? Like maybe 10 of them.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
1 to 5.
I guess it depends who they're giving the loan to.
Yeah,
right?
and what for? Especially people like there's so many people that watch Property Brothers once and think they could do this shit. I'm sure you watch a lot of people flop.
Totally.
And a lot of people sell secondhand, a half finished project because they need the cash income.
That's some of the buildings I was buying, right? It seemed like I was buying, my first two were buildings that either a current owner needed money for another property, or B, they started it and maybe got over their head on it. But on top of that, I was getting loans that are hard to get. So construction loans, like a mortgage or an equity loan, those are somewhat standard. Equity loans are easy to get, right? Because so say you have a home that's worth $400,000 and you have a loan on it for, say, $200,000. The difference there between the value of $400,000 and the $200,000 mortgage you have is $200,000, right? A bank will often, if it's your primary residence, they will often loan you sometimes 80, 70, 80, 90% of that discrepancy. Okay. They always want to keep some wiggle room, right? Because if they ever have to take that property, they want to make sure that like they're not tight.
Okay, so that they're planning on the interest that they might need to incur, that little bit of extra profit.
It's not even, it's if I have to take your house, right?
Okay.
So say I give you an equity loan, right, and you don't pay it, and they eventually have to take the property. They want to make sure that they didn't lend this guy $400,000 on a $400,000 house because that's too close, right?
Yeah.
They want to lend them $310 on a four, so that if they have to short sale it or whatever, they've got some money.
They're still going to come out
Correct.
in the green.
So those are easy to get because there is actually they call that a secured loan. There's actually something that's tied to the loan, a collateral, right? There's also unsecured loans where like if you're fancy enough and you've got good enough credit and you have enough income, banks will give you unsecured lines of credit, which is like literally we're going to give you $70,000 and we have nothing other than like your word that you're going to pay it back.
Yeah. And maybe a track record that every once in a while this guy likes to take 70 G's out to do some stuff.
Yeah, correct. And those are a higher rate typically because it's more of a risk. But what we're doing now is it's called a construction loan. And there's a lot that goes into it, but more or less and they're hard to get, right? Because banks, if I were to skimp on this building we're doing right now, if halfway I would just say, screw it, we're not doing it. Like a bank doesn't want this piece of shit half-finished building, right? Yes. So the way a construction loan works is, say I buy a building for $80,000, a shell, and it needs $400,000 in renovation. Mm-hmm. That is a $480,000 deal. A bank will require me to come to the table typically with 20% at closing. And then what will happen is I'll need a sidecar amount of funds to basically fund work until I get to a draw. So say it needs $400,000 in renovations. I'll probably do that in 6 or 8 draws. Okay. So, but the problem is banks don't just want to pay out on stuff that isn't done. So I would have to buy the building. Say I need to have 20% of 480. Which is, I don't know, that's 90 I don't know, over $90,000, whatever. I need to have money on the side also that I can get us demoed, framed, new roof, rough plumbing, rough electric, and then I'd go to the bank and say, hey, we did all these things, and here's all the receipts, here's everything you need, and then they would give me that money back. Okay, so it's like this revolving door of money that, and you do that 6, 7, 8 times until you get to the allotted amount that the bank is gonna. That budget you said initially, that $400,000, that you can't draw past that, right? They'll let you draw to that amount. So that's the whole game, is making sure that as you're going, you're staying on budget, because everything beyond that, is coming out of your pocket at the end.
Yeah.
But so you don't just say, hey, I'm going to buy this building for $80,000. I need $400,000. The bank just doesn't give you $400,000.
No, it's not a single installment.
No,
But you're saying at a certain point, when they see that you've gotten most of this done, they'll kind of give you the remainder of that loan?
We're dealing with a bank now that knows that we know what we're doing, and they trust us, so it's a little different. But I've literally had a third-party company come before, and they come inspect, right? So I go to the bank and say, hey, I did all these things. We did the drywall, we did this, and they would send this guy, this old guy's name is Giuseppe, I never get him. He would come from this company. It's all they did is they would go to construction jobs, and he would just approve to the bank that, hey, they did what they said.
That guy's buttoned up.
Yeah.
This dude's got to be tight.
Yeah. And so, and I had multiple times, right, where I wanted 100% of cabinets or whatever, and one of the cabinets was, and he would issue like 80% payment. Like, they're very strict about. I had one time where the floors needed sanded, and the cabinets were ready, and the cabinets were in the basement of my one building, because I couldn't put them in until the floors were sanded, and I needed a bank draw because I was out of money. But the fact that the cabinets were in that basement and not installed in this building, I couldn't get paid on them. Yeah, and that's pretty standard.
So you've expensed it out. You've spent the money, but
spent
they're
20
saying,
grand on cabinets.
they're like, we don't know where you put that cash. You're
Correct.
like, I'll walk you to the basement.
Yeah.
Like, if it's not in this project,
They think they can walk away, right? And so
Holy
yeah,
shit.
that's how this works, right? And so it's a little easier now. I mean, we're still sending pictures, and this bank we're working with, they're awesome.
But you're still sitting there sanding this thing, sending pics along the way, being like, I need it in 48 hours, man. Like, keep sanding.
Yeah, I mean, we just did a draw like 2 days ago, and I came out of pocket because we had a drywall guy that needed some money, and we were low, right? So I threw in some cash, and then the whole goal is, you get the funds, and then you pay yourself back,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, that's how a construction loan works. But the problem is, construction loans they're hard to get, right? Because so this is the crazy part, is like, I never went to school for this, right? I don't have like a license. I'm insured as a general contractor, but like, I go to banks now, and like, they're like, yeah, dude, like, cause I've got a track record. I've got a bunch of pictures and videos of what we've done. I've done this, 5 times, however many now. But it's funny how like faking it until you make it, like, is a thing, man. And like, now I go to banks, and they're like, okay, yeah, like, yeah, construction loan, it's yours, and I think people underestimate how powerful, like, believing in yourself and like chasing a dream, or just working hard, right? And I think sometimes it seems like banks are lending to just hard workers more than they are to, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. Well, when you look around at what your friends do, these people that you grew up with, that everyone has opportunities for trajectories that are unknown to the rest of us. But it's crazy to see one person pop off, and now you're, a leading real estate, an investor in the OTR.
I don't know if leading's the right
but
word.
Still,
but
you're doing it in a place where you have buildings going up, and people are having their minds blown about this shit, and other people are doing other great things, and just like the how you get there. How much in that process of being a young person finding these dreams is the pleasantries of being able to speak well and being interested and showing that you're passionate in a way that allows other people to insert their passions?
Totally. So people skills. I tell you, you ever play like Madden or something? I don't play video games, but where you can build a player, right? And they give you, say, 90 points, and you can, make strength a certain amount, and, athleticism or hands or speed, whatever the heck it is. If I was building a person, right, I feel like you got to bump the people skills way up. I get into sometimes deals or business partners, or, I feel like I talk to people, and like, somehow they're like, wow, like I can talk to anybody and anytime, whether it's a super fancy dad at a wedding, or a guy that's cutting tile that, grew up in Nicaragua. Obviously, you might have a language barrier between he and I, but
Totally,
like,
but if you try,
totally,
it means something.
totally,
To that
and he
person.
can, he understand. But I guess what I'm getting at is, I filmed a wedding recently where the couple were both very, very highly educated, and I was texting my brother that day. I'm like, man, I mean, I don't know. It was just like, these kids had a very prestigious, what's it called? Very prestigious. From a college. They had a degree from a college.
Okay, yeah.
Right. And I just remember thinking, like, man, if I worked for a company they worked for, like I feel like I would do better there than they would because they had a very tremendous deficits with people skills. Like it was unbelievable, you know. And unless they were in a very, you know, sitting behind a computer, or they were, you know, you can't run a business typically without like some level of comprehensive people skills.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that was one of the main things I had going for me was even when I was a 25-year-old and walking into a bank and looking for a $400,000 loan, they like somehow, A, I started to have a little bit of a track record, but B, they felt that I was good for it, you know?
Yeah.
I actually used to have this rule where for like after I would get a loan for like the first year, I would go pay it in person. And so instead of just having it pull automatically, I would literally go to the branch every 30 days and I would pay it because every time I was in there, they would see me and I was in work clothes like this. And like, I felt like it started to really establish you know, instead of seeing them one time on closing day, I would see them 12 times throughout the year and I'd come in with drywall dust on me. And then, you know, Tom from the bank was like, man, like, you know, Squirrel's doing it. You know what I'm saying? And so like just little things like that like, I don't know if it was because I didn't have my account set up right way or what, but I would literally drive to the bank and pay my loan because I felt like something was coming from it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you know, relating two of your entrepreneurial pursuits, you know, what you did in high school versus this, like, one's a social outlet. You know, all you're doing is flipping bottles back and forth to people. The other one's you're sitting in here sanding this floor yourself because the cabinets aren't up, and to get that cash to set, these need to be sanded. So it's like, so you're on your hands and knees doing this for hours. But still, if there's a contractor in one of your buildings, you seem like the type of guy that's going to be there, chatting with them, taking a video, doing your part. Because people are fuel for the passionate. People are fuel for the folks that are working really hard. And when you find agreeableness in people like that, and you start to harvest from that or to invest in that, you realize that the ROI in hardworking people is exponential compared to anything else we do in this life.
Yeah.
Like when we got each other, we got each other.
Yeah. And I was there watching, and I'm always at the building. Like I'm literally the reason why I'm here in a podcast, and I got drywall dust because I was painting walls this morning. Right?
Yeah, when I saw it was 2 hours ago too, I was like, Jesus God.
Yeah,
man,
no. But I'm there watching because I need to learn too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like I can look around this basement and I can tell you how like pretty much everything's done. But 8 years ago, I didn't know anything. I didn't really know what it looked like behind a wall. I didn't understand why this panel was there or how power gets to a building and then it goes to a panel and then it goes to the unit. But I would make sure that when the electricians were there, running wires, I'm around, not to annoy them, but because like this is like free. This is like free education. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and it's direct education too. I think, you know, you're probably a guy that learned a lot of things on the internet. You read a lot of books. You got to do what you got to do. But in the pursuit of blue collar, you know, whether it's music production or hanging drywall, it's best to have a mentor, someone that does it great in front of you, so you can poke and prod, do it in front of them, fuck it up, ask a question, move on from there. And not only do you get the free education, but you get the investment with time with somebody. So when you need a favor, they remember you being there. You know, it's not like you were just someone asking for a handout. You were someone asking for investment in you in that project.
Yeah. And a lot of times I'm using my people skills that I feel I'm good at to make it so that when I'm hanging out with them and watching them, it's not awkward, right? You know, I'm like having a conversation about this and that, and next thing you know, we're talking. And so like I'm using being a decent person to be around to make it so that when I'm there watching them and stealing knowledge, that like it's a good transaction, right?
Yeah.
You know, versus you go into a homeowner's house and, you know, I don't, I'm imagining, say I'm editing a wedding film and there's a client over my shoulder watching me. That would be weird, right?
Yeah.
And there are people that like are hoverers, right? Where you go to do a flooring job at somebody's house and they're just like sitting there watching you the whole time. That can be weird, but I made it so that like they enjoyed my company. And the next thing I know, for the last 3 hours, I've been watching this guy, you know, run pipes or do whatever they're doing. And I've learned a lot. He's enjoyed having me there because otherwise he'd be alone, you know, just talking to himself. And just doing that day after day after day, month after month, I started to acquire like a very reasonable set of skills that I became like a dangerous real estate developer, you know?
Well, it's cool also that you gain your independence from the people that you pay and treat well.
Totally.
You know, like if you're not learning while you're I'm learning when I'm around my drummers, and nothing makes me appreciate my drummers better than when they leave and I try to do the shit they did and I'm, not where I need to be at it, but I'm getting there. Next time we hang out, I ask more advanced questions because I've gone there for it. And these people feel like their time in teaching you or just being around you has been considered well. They feel like they made a difference in your life.
Sure.
When you see this guy at Lowe's that sold you this first building, he probably wants to dap you up because you're doing well. It makes him feel good.
When we were closing on that building, the first one, Sil, I'll never forget, he said he's at closings all the time, right? It's his life, you know? And he's like, you'll be back. And what he meant, he's like, he saw it as a young, he was like, oh, this guy, he's going to do it. Yeah. And, I've done a bunch of them. And it's like Sil's maybe been to hundreds of closings, right? He's always buying this building and selling that building and doing, cash exchanges But you're right. I mean, I see Sil a couple, 3-4 times a year at Lowe's, and we kind of like head nod to each other.
Yeah,
but
it's affirming to him that he saw it in you, and he gave you that project in some way. Like everyone likes to take credit for things in odd ways. In the same way that like when your dad brings his buddies to a job site, it's like, look at this motherfucker I made. Like like look at this person in my life.
Yeah, I don't really know how I mean, look, I have some weaknesses in life for sure.
For sure.
I'm the last person to do my taxes every year with my CPA. I hate doing taxes.
Yeah.
Organization is not, like, my house is organized and it's fairly clean and my car's clean, but, like, when it comes to, like, keeping track of payments and, like, I just, my brain doesn't love it.
Yeah. How do you fix that for yourself? Are you regimented on a phone? Do you use one thing in particular?
It's a good question. I was actually approached, we can get into this, about 2 years ago, I had a friend reach out to me that was interested in real estate. He had sold a business, and he was like, hey, I'd love to grab dinner. My wife and I, my business partner's wife, and he wanted to meet, grab dinner. And, like, I'm passionate about real estate. So, like, actually tonight for dinner, I'm supposed to meet somebody. And then I just love telling people what I do. And hopefully somebody does something because of me, right? And it has happened. My buddy Anderson, I remember he and I got lunch. I was kind of new into doing that. He was moving back from Texas, and I got him out of the idea of like being his own GC. And he has a full-blown business now.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So like he's killing it. He built his own house for himself. He's done condo buildings. And I actually just referred him a job yesterday. He is doing really well. And right, I remember he and I met at Senate over hot dogs.
Nice.
Like probably 8 years ago when he first moved back to Cincinnati, and he was kind of trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life.
Yeah.
But met, his name's Stu. He's my business partner.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, we weren't business partners. I thought I was just going to kind of give him advice. Say, hey, here's what I'm doing. I'm buying a building for this much money. I'm putting this much money into it. I'm renting them for this much a square foot. I've got property tax and water bills and all this. But, when it's all said and done, there's some money to be made there. Mm-hmm. And Stu is smart, man. He showed up with a notebook and he built a business, a local business, actually the pedal wagon.
Nice.
Yeah. So Stu and my other buddy, Jack, Tom was involved as well, but they took the pedal wagon from nothing to, I think they had like 30 or 40 wagons in 4 cities, and they sold it to somebody. But that's the other thing about starting business. Too many people, like, it's not reinventing the wheel often, right? If you go to Nashville, right, and it's a similar economy and the weather similar type of person, and you see something working there, it might work in Cincinnati too, right? And I think that's what they did. They went somewhere and saw these little pedal wagons driving around, and they're like, man, we should call it pedal wagon, right? Move it to Cincinnati, start little, put it in over the Rhine, and then they slowly built this business until it grew to a place where somebody wanted to purchase it for quite a bit of money.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting comparison of businesses to music, because sometimes there's imposter syndrome with sounding like your heroes, when it's actually it's the name of the game, man. Like, I've listened to enough Prince records that when I try to squeak and I try to get this out and I want to make things snap like that, then hopefully I sound like the boss.
Yeah.
And if I get really good at my job, I sound like the right combination of these 3 great ideas. I have a business that encapsulates these 3 great ideas, and that's how we evolve. That's how the market re-stimulates and takes care of people by being crafty and servicing folks around you too. It's like we live in a world where everyone either wants to have a job where they have no concerns, or they want to have everything they've ever wanted in that. It's like, just be happy with providing something that you feel is worthwhile. Whether it's an apartment for someone downtown that has 20-foot ceilings. It's
28
bad.
feet.
28 foot. Jeez.
It's a cool building.
Don't let me miss that
Yeah.
8-foot person, man. Like that's. You're providing something that's meaningful to you, and you did it with your hands. And also, I respect someone that doesn't sell those buildings off immediately. You get to know the tenants. You upkeep the space. You let the shortcomings of this be on your own plate in the same way that, right now I'm getting in the game of I make my own records, and then I'll work with other artists, and I'll help them make a record.
Sure.
But I'm not going to keep making your records. I want you to make your records and
Sure.
come back and show me how you would fix my system.
Wow.
Because there's no point in me stepping up to bat and trying to figure out what you sound like. I fought with producers in my life for years to sound more like me.
Yeah.
And the reason I didn't sound like that is because I wasn't my own GC. I wasn't that guy
Wow. Yeah.
putting that together.
That's a perfect comparison. The difference between somebody that is producing a record and somebody that is producing a property, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah. Well, you can go a little bit. It's a little more heavy at that point, but someone can live in that space eternally. Like yes, an apartment might be 4 years of your life, but a song is this sonic room that you can turn it on in your car and you get that beautiful nostalgic rush back to high school or this summer or the day you lost your grandma. Like shit's heavy, but it is a sonic portal to those things.
Totally. Yeah. Very interesting. Man. So I met with Stu. I think that's where we were at.
Yeah.
And we met at the Eagle. Okay. And we had dinner. And at the time, I thought this relationship was going to be nothing more than giving an awesome dude advice. Okay. And I did. I told him, hey, this is what I'm doing. Here's how much I'm buying the buildings for. Here's how easily I'm renting them or not renting them. Here's some mistakes that I may make. And I immediately started to notice that Stu was a lot more organized than I was. He was like the dude that I wish I was on a lot of things. Okay. But Stu's looking at me wishing like, man, like I want to renovate buildings. I want to get in real estate, but I know nothing. He's where I was in terms of construction and real estate and knowledge, right? The same place I was 8 years prior. And so I think we both kind of subconsciously like recognized that there might be an opportunity here. And kind of a long story, but we found a property together. It's kind of a long story. It ended up getting involved in a lawsuit that we're hoping we're going to still acquire. But that was our first deal where we just kind of showed up and looked at it together. I went and saw some deals with him and just told him like, I don't think, Stu had some money and he was a great dude. I'm like, dude, you can get into a better deal than this, pass on this one, and he was also showing me properties that like, I knew what I was doing on Over the Rhine and I knew those tenants and how that worked. But like we looked at some buildings, we went into one, it was in Northern Kentucky. It was like these people, we walked in and they didn't have any furniture and it was a bunch of like, kind of like goth emo kids sitting on the ground. They had like pet tarantulas and it was really weird. There was no lights on. And I just remember looking at Stu and thinking like, if these people leave, I don't know where to find more. Like it was just a weird property where I was like, and Over the Rhine, when I got a 30-foot ceiling loft open up, like I put it on Craigslist and it's gone. Yeah. And so I told him like, hey, I know what I'm doing, but like this is a whole different thing. It's the difference between playing, music, at a wedding versus playing music at a
dive bar in the middle of nowhere.
Correct.
It's like, who are the customers you're looking to service in this?
Correct.
It's like when I buy T-shirts that look like shit, I'm not going to sell them. That's inventory sitting there. If you have a building on your hand and you're fighting to get tenants in there, you have the wrong building.
Totally. I mean, if the goal is to rent this building, right, and rent it stably, and get the majority of your bills paid, I didn't know where to find these tarantula kids. If it was just weird, like there's no lights.
They're not on Craigslist.
Yeah.
I mean, where the fuck?
and so I told Stu, hey, pass this one, and we kept seeing a couple. It's kind of a funny story, but shout out Isaac. This was Isaac's building, I believe. I knew a guy. I still know him well. His wife is from Cincinnati. He married her. He lives in Boulder. They live in Boulder. But because of the price of things here relative to the price in Boulder, Isaac loves buying stuff in Cincinnati. Yeah. And so he had like all these buildings that Stu was going to see. I connected Stu with Isaac. And so Stu was going to look at a bunch of Isaac's buildings, which is hilarious. Isaac had never seen himself. So he had all these properties. And so he texted me.
That's what those moguls do, though, man. Like, there's people in the game that's not your game. It's not the GC work. This like moving money around. Yeah. Maybe they got that $70,000 line of credit. Yeah.
And so Isaac's like, he texted me. He's like, hey, how's my building? And like, he had never been there. And I was like, it's kind of weird. You got weird tarantula kids living there. But Isaac's like, hey, you and Stu should go see XYZ property. And so Stu and I showed up, and I'll never forget. Stu was like, hey, if you're going to go see the building, can I go see it with you? And like we parked next to each other, we showed up and we just kind of looked at the building and we both just kind of looked at each other and we're like, this thing was huge. Okay. And it is expensive. And I just kind of looked at Stu and I'm like, I don't even think we even talked about it. We just like became partners. Yeah.
Well, how do you? I definitely get that kind of chemistry when we walk into a scene. And it's like we could either both do the same thing, or we could redelegate. How do you redelegate with a partner on something that's so ambiguous of everything that needs done? You just know it needs done.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I just kind of noticed Stu, like when he showed up to our meeting and he had a notebook and, he would tag me in emails and like, it's like they would ask a question and he comes back with like all his answers in red. And like, it was just like, I'm like, man, this kid's good,
Yeah.
And so we reached out to the owner of that property. It's kind of a long story. It's actually resolved now, but there was kind of like a legal situation that I don't want to get too deep into. But we reached out to the owner, which is like a city entity, and we said, hey, we're interested in this property. Stu was lucky because he had me to reference as his partner. Here's my track record. Here's all the properties I've done. Here's pictures. And we smacked him in the face with this like really thorough application. I mean, they would have been dumb to say no.
Yeah.
And so we slapped them in the face with it, and they're like, yep, we would love that. Tell us your development plan, show us your numbers, income, et cetera. And next thing you knew, we were partnering on this really, really high-profile building in Over the Rhine that we were going to turn into 9 apartments. And so it's a long story, but we literally got to the finish line on this building, and a previous owner was disgruntled about a previous foreclosure, and they tried to sue the people we were buying it from. Good news is it's all resolved now.
Seems like a tough but real part of that, though, where there's a lot of money tied up in a building that might just be sitting there.
Still is. And it was a learning situation. Stu and I, we've learned a lot from that. And this is, just the cost of doing business sometimes. And the good news is hopefully we're going to be able to access the money we have tied up in that building because we're hoping that we're still going to acquire it and do the original plan. But it was also a test for Stu. Like immediately his first deal, a bunch of money into it, thousands of hours, did everything right. And then literally 3 days before closing, we had gotten a tax abatement. We literally got approved on our construction loan. We had literally everything in line. And then literally a woman comes 2 days before closing and was suing the people we were buying it from. So long story short, it took a long time. That's all resolved. Our money is still tied up in this property. And this is kind of important. People are like, well, why are you spending money on a building you don't own? Good question. So when you buy a building, not from like a private person, when you buy it from like, 3CDC or the city, they make you basically have your building permit to sell it to you. So we signed a document saying, hey, the building's going to be yours. But before it's yours, you have to do all your homework. They want to make sure that if they sell you a building, you don't just sit on it, right? Mm-hmm. Because that building has already been sat on. Like, the whole goal is to get it redeveloped.
Yeah, if they're going to invest time and money into pushing this deal forward, especially for saying like, there's a big difference in my mind in a 3CDC versus an individual like yourself that's hungry and wants to see this to the finish line because they have the capital to let something sit or to make it a parking garage or those kind of things. So to make it tenable spaces is a totally different liability for the city at large.
Yeah, I've actually bought 2 buildings from 3CDC.
Really?
Yeah, and so they have some buildings that just really don't fit what they do, right?
Yeah.
So, if they have a whole block of buildings, that fits. But if they get a random one on a street that's in between, like, if it doesn't fit what they do, then they'll sell it to somebody like me.
Yeah.
And so I've done 2 of them through them. But so long story short is, part of buying a building from 3CDC or part of buying a building from the city or this other entity is they will make you have everything you need. Basically, you have to have there's no reason why the day they sell it to you, you can't start working on it. Mm-hmm. And so in order to do that, there is a financial commitment that is involved on my behalf, on Stu's behalf, on anybody's behalf that would want to do this. You could still buy a building private to private, right? And you don't need to have your building permit prior to closing. But if you want to get a building from, 3CDC, et cetera, that's how it looks. And that's how we had money tied up in this property was because we had to do that process with them.
Mm-hmm. So you're waiting on this permit to come through, and then there's also the legal aspect. Okay.
Yeah, we had the permit. Literally, we were in a historic board hearing, and we became aware of the situation. So long story short, it took a long time. It's now resolved. We still are holding out hope that we actually have a meeting on the 19th
Nice.
with the previous owner, with the current owner, and we're hoping we're just going to pick everything up where we left off. But in the meantime, we got sick of waiting, and we went and we found the new one we're doing now.
Nice.
Yeah, and so we got sick of waiting. We found a building. I remember I reached out to it was actually 3CDC, and I had done a building previously from them. And so the good news is when you buy a building and you kill it and it's a pleasant experience, a lot of times that opens up the ability to reach back out, right?
Yeah.
And so I reached out and said, hey, do you guys own this building? And it was as a building that I noticed was abandoned. I had actually reached out previously and said, hey, do you have anything? And they said, we don't have anything right now. And so I emailed back and I said, well, what about this building? For some reason, I thought they owned it. And they said, no, we don't own that one, but we own that one. And it was like 2 buildings over. And
Nice.
and we went through it, and I said, well, take it, And so Stu and I started this whole process over again, right? But I'm just telling him, like, dude, eventually, like, this whole lawsuit, and like, I had never been through that before. I'm like, this is a fluke. Like, you can trust that this is going to be worth your time. And so we started this whole process over, and we're taking this abandoned building and turning it into to 3 apartments.
All this 9 apartment facilities,
sad.
That's as adults and people with real accountability, it's hard to see something that far down the road and have faith that it's going to work out. But in life, there's something so special about like saying like, my hands are tied, I can't do anything about this, so why am I going to mentally stress it on to the next?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, that's poor me, or am I going to get out there? We're going to make our own luck. You know what I'm saying? And
bang.
And so we found a building. Through the grace of working hard in the past. The building, the opportunity was very real. Because I think they were impressed by what I did. I bought my 3rd building from them, and did a great job. They used to send somebody every month, like when they didn't know who I was, somebody would come from 3CDC and like walk the building and make sure that we were like actually doing it.
Yeah. Well, it's something so special too to be hospitable to that person. They come in, they want to see the building.
Yeah.
You talk them up, like, I'll see you next month, and it's a good thing. Like, suddenly the arrangement changes where everyone has to have redundancy in that level of business. But to have personality as the guy that's going to put this thing together, like, that's the affirmation, too.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that a bride wants when she calls you asking about her video,
Sure. Well, the funny thing is in this building, nobody's came to see, So like they know now that, like, we know what we're doing, and that we're going to do it in a reasonable time, and that, it's going to be done right. And so, but that's kind of cool, because I'm marrying, my one job is I'm a videographer, and then my other job is I do construction. And so, like, every couple months, I make like a little highlight video of like what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I shot that off to 3CDC the other day. We shoot it off to the bank, and it's like, hey, that's my hobby, and it's what I like doing. And I have a lot of people message me on Instagram, right? That are like, hey, like, this is my favorite Instagram to follow. I have a lot of people that, like, they just, like, when they're at work, they just think it's cool to see like what we're doing, you know?
People are missing that in their life, man. Like that hands-on fulfillment. There's a lot of folks that think they could do this work, that love watching it, that one day they're going to find out, but they're still going to grind through it, and they're going to figure out how to get there.
Yeah. So anyway, that's why I make the videos, but then those videos come in hand when you need to foster a relationship with a bank, or let 3CDC, so when the people we send that to at 3CDC, like, I think it blows them away to think like, man, like, this is cool that we can see our building that we had, that we didn't really want, that nobody else really wanted, and now these kids are just crushing this thing, and here's all the stuff they're doing. And so it's cool that, like, 2 of my hobbies are kind of like, they're kind of existing perfectly together.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a question with that. Like, there's artistry in what you do with the buildings, but there's also so many expenses that you can't be very precious about your art. Like, your choice of historic bricks is kind of hands tied, but which bricks you get depending on that price is like, now we have to fit a budget and all that. So does the visual medium of videography give you freedom in that art to say, like, no, just, we have to get this project done? Yes, it has to be pretty, but it doesn't have to be my end-all, be-all, because the video will be that.
Sure. So there's levels to everything, right? My brother's doing a big renovation of his house, and he built some crazy pool house, and I think they spent they spent twice as much on one little kitchen cabinet situation than we spent on three. Like, so I guess when you're doing rentals downtown, don't get me wrong, the stuff we provide are nice, but there's like levels to everything, right?
Yeah.
Do you want the tile that's, $26 a square foot, or do you want the tile that's $3 a square foot? And if you do the $3 square foot tile well, and it looks nice and it's straight, and it can look really, really nice.
Yeah. And I'm sure you know the durability on this based on the expense you're going to have over the lifetime of the building.
Correct. And a lot of that's, based upon my experience, right? When, I go to flip an apartment, when somebody moves out and somebody moves in, I get an idea of like what's not holding up, what is, and that's good knowledge that I can then take to the next one to know. Unfortunately, those original pine floors, when you sand them, they look cool, but they're soft. Yeah, and so like this new building we're doing, not only for a sound standpoint, but for a durability standpoint, we're using like a really, really high end. It's called Nucor Performance. You can wet mop it. I mean, these people could have like a pet tiger in there, dude, and it'd be fine.
What a great thing to be able to tell a tenant, like whatever awful pets you got, reptiles or large dogs, bring them in. Good floors, baby.
No tarantulas. Though. Yeah. So, but anyway. So anyway, like this is all things I've learned, right? But obviously those new floors are more expensive than sanding the original floors. So dude,
I get a house account.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, until you, I mean, it's like anything. I'm still learning. This is the cool part about this new building is so we're doing it right now. It's on Walnut Street, and this is my first building that like. Nobody's really there besides us. And so the cool thing is, and I don't know if maybe you can relate to this, when I would have a guy there with me that was like a really, a high paid carpenter, there were certain things that I would kind of pass off on him because he was there, and it's weird that like when I actually go to work knowing, hey, I'm going to build this closet that day, like I have the knowledge and the ability in me, but I have to just eliminate the thought that I'm going to have somebody else do it for me. And so I've learned a lot about myself in this building in the sense that like all these 8 years and all these buildings and all these scenarios and this drywall fix and, framing of this wall and, using Tapcons or, using a whatever, like I had all this knowledge in my brain to do it myself. But when there was somebody there that I had the ability to say, hey, like, why don't you do this? I was like kind of holding myself back, and so this has been a cool building because like, right now when I leave here, I'm going to go back there. Like it's myself, my business partner, and a guy that works for us. Like I guess I theoretically would be like the senior construction guy in that group. Whereas in the past, I had somebody there with me that was probably a little more senior than I was.
Yeah.
That was paid. And so as a result, I've kind of unleashed knowledge that like I had in my brain, right? That like I was kind of keeping in the back before because I was like paying a guy to do it for me. And so I've learned a lot too. I've learned a lot. Like I'm fully capable of doing a lot of things that in the past I was paying people to do.
Yeah. Well, and then you decide in time if it's worth your time to do that. But still, as someone that at this point in your career, you could probably just be the boss and manage these things. You have a good idea of how it goes. It's more fun to be doing it, man.
Totally.
Like it's just that's where you're gonna get your rocks off. We can all make a dime at the end of the day doing shit we don't like, but to be willing to get uncomfortable in the mind and your own skin and succeed in that's why you live a life like this, man. In the same way that you see potential in a building when you walk through, you saw that in a 24-year-old version of yourself. And you said, I can take this and I can make that. Maybe I just have the bricks right now, but this thing's going to have 28-foot ceilings. Like, this life is going to be magnificent, man. And so many people need to hear that wake up.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a reason why I'm doing it. Like, the thing is, technically, yeah, I'm going to hopefully make money off of doing these buildings, but I also just love the process, right? Where, like, demo day, the cool thing.
Okay, I was gonna say, what's your favorite? Is it demo day?
Demo. So we do some of our own demos. Some of these buildings are so gnarly, and that like I got a guy named Jeff that we hired to do a lot of demo. He's just there's just a bunch of hillbillies from
brooding
Kentucky.
Dudes
They come in and just tear everything up, and here's the problem is you have to decide between what is the budget, right, and time is important, right. So yeah, we could probably demo the building ourselves, but if it's going to take three of us, a month or a month and a half to tear this thing out versus a group of Jeff's guy to take 8 days, um, if the budget is reasonable, then like we would much rather go that route because the building doesn't get framed, we don't get the wires ran, we don't get the pipes ran until all that's torn out. But the cool thing is like yes, man, this building when it's all said and done, it'll probably take us 9 months. But the cool thing is each day in those 9 months, the overall process kind of masks itself because there are like fun parts, right? Like the first step was we rebuilt the entire first floor. At the time, like if you would sit there and think like, man, I'm so far away from renting this thing, like it'd be overwhelming and it'd be hard. But at the same time, like I was enjoying that day building that floor and, running lasers, making sure everything's level. And, so it's cool. It is a long process and it is very overwhelming, but at the same time, there are individual, it's like a musician, right? I mean, musician goes on tour and they're stopping in 68 cities, right? And they're in city 5, they're probably like, yeah, exactly. Like, fuck, I want to go home. But if each city is fun and has something to offer and you're meeting a new person in each city, that's what I would liken it to, and that's kind of how it works. And so that by the time you get to city 68, you're like, that was cool. That was enjoyable. And that's what it's like to do these buildings. It is a grind and it is hard, but at the same time, like today we're priming walls. And it's cool because the walls, when we're done with today, they're going to look different than they were this morning. And even though after the primer, we've got to put on the finish coat and we've got to do all the cabinets, and it's still cool to see progress.
Yes. People don't realize the power of a checklist. It's so nice to scratch something off your checklist, man. Like, the harder the thing is to take off that list, the better it feels to check the box.
Totally.
Now, what would you say about like, these two businesses are very different in terms of what you do, but overall, it's about acquiring skills and then properly expensing out what you're going to spend on them, whether it's your time or materials, and then putting yourself in a category of business you want to do. You're saying, I don't want to do this one in Northern Kentucky because it doesn't have the ROI that I'm looking for. I'm going for OTR again. Or I don't want to do this 50-person wedding. I want to do 450 in Italy. How do you situate yourself for the kind of work that you want to be doing as an entrepreneur?
Good question. So I think that's a really good question. What I would say, okay, when people get into real estate, I always tell them like, that's like saying you want to get into into cars, right? Like what kind of cars? Like what era? What, like do you want them to have 2 doors, 4 doors? What kind of, like, I would encourage somebody, if they're interested in real estate, you kind of have to like hyper focus on like one type, right? And I hyper focused on over the Rhine multifamilies because I started over the course of time dealing with architects, dealing with banks, dealing with the codes with fire code and fire windows and all this stuff. I started to understand how that little niche worked. If somebody called me right now, like, hey, my buddy's wants to flip a house in Oakley right now, do you want it? Like, that's not really what I do.
Yeah,
I could do it, and it would hopefully turn out okay. But I have focused highly on the over the Rhine multifamily because it's what I've cut my teeth on, and I know the rules, I know the finances, I know what I can rent them for, and so I guess I would encourage people like, I mean, I don't know. Unfortunately, I've been at the same wedding. I filmed a wedding at the same place. I think this is the 5th. Friday will be the 5th straight week I've been there.
At the View?
At the monastery.
At the monastery.
Yeah.
Well, that's the efficiencies of just at bats.
But what I'm getting at is I have a certain client, right? And there's a certain wedding that I'm looking for. And so when somebody emails about, hey, we're getting married at this, this barn that's 3 hours away, like I'm not saying I won't do it, but it just doesn't really fit typically what I'm doing, you know? And so I guess that's kind of a long-winded answer to get into like, I feel like I've done well at like hyper focusing and marketing myself to like the little niche that I want to be in.
Yeah. Well, you can spread yourself too thin, especially in your craft. And it takes someone wise enough to say, I know what I do and I know what I don't do, so that you don't end up in a situation where you bit off more than you can chew and you're outside of your normal realm and your other projects are suffering. Most of all, it's like if you take on the house in Oakley and then your other projects start to suffer and you had so much momentum put into those, it's like, no, just keep your blinders on in some ways. Stay keen on what you do great and excel in that and continue to push that kind of thing.
That's so true. I mean, yesterday, I looked at a flooring job for a guy. Seemed like a great dude. And showed up, and it was a little more work than I thought it was going to be. So I sent it to Anderson, who's the guy that I got lunch with like 8 years ago. And I just thought, like, man, I don't have this kind of time, you know. And if I could have probably got it done, but like my business partner would have been mad at me, or my wedding clients would have been mad at me. And so that is a struggle of mine. Is like you have to be very aware that like we only have a finite amount of time. You know,
but passing off that work is also a beautiful thing that we can do within communities of entrepreneurs. Like,
totally. And I know he'll kill it. That's why I gave it to him.
Yeah.
And I hope he does it. I mean, obviously you got to agree on a price, and there's some things still in the way. But, you know, I'm referring him to somebody that like I think highly of, and I think will do a great job.
Yeah. Well, this has been like really inspiring in a different way than I expected. You know, you and I hit it off at one of these wedding gigs, but to hear about the way that you kind of fell into this craft is what I think a lot of us always need in this life as a kick in the ass of start living to your fullest potential. Find something that makes you a little bit crazy in the best version of yourself and pursue. And you need a little bit of fuck you. Let someone tell you can't do that job, then go do that job if you want
I
it.
still get told no. I mean, when a bank tells me no, we're not going to finance it, I don't walk out of there and think, man, this deal isn't. I go to right to another bank.
Yeah.
Like there's too many people in life that they get told no on something, and they think that like, you know, granted there's things that no means no, but like, you know, when you're chasing a business or you're chasing a dream, like, I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is like, I feel like I have a theory in life. People that are successful, I got thrown a bone. I was sitting in a situation where I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I was literally working at a restaurant in Anderson Township, and I liked cameras. And a girl messaged me and said, "Hey, would you want to use your camera at my wedding?" And she threw me a bone, right? I didn't know anything about that job. I didn't know that existed. I didn't know that was a career. And but what I did is I took the opportunity and I ran with it. There's too many people, they like get handed an opportunity, right? And then they flake on it, or they, you know, like, hey, somebody wants me to renovate a house, and they, you know, it's like I freaking took this opportunity, right? And I was like, man, I'm going to own this, you know? And I feel like that is kind of what separates people from that are just kind of existing in life from people that are you know, that are crushing it. Not to say that I am, but like I got handed an opportunity, and I was like, man, I'm not just going to film this one wedding. I'm going to like I filmed like 300 weddings now.
Yeah.
You know, and similar to you, like when your buddies started learning guitar, right? When they're 11 years old to impress the girls, right? I play guitar, so I know what that's like.
Yeah.
I learned Wonderwall and, you know, all the songs that the girls wanted to hear. Howie Day, Collide.
Classics.
So, but you decided, hey, I'm not just gonna like, you know, I'm not just gonna play a little. Like I'm gonna like come home after school every day and play, and I'm gonna try to start a band, and I'm not just gonna learn the songs that I think are easy to play and the songs that have easy chords to read. I'm gonna like try to play shit that's hard to play so that I get better. You know, I know a little bit about that world, but like similar, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, especially when you talk about like, there's things that I dabble in, there's things I don't. For the longest time, weddings was something I thought I don't dabble in. But I started taking some gigs that required me to learn this catalog of hits that you play at weddings.
That you didn't play previously.
That I didn't play at all, you know, and I had to learn it at a different level of specificity, because if it's a guitar player just playing acoustic backing themselves up, you don't have to learn the solo of Don't Stop Believing. I hate playing that solo.
I can do that. If you need that guy, I can do that. But I can't play the solo of Don't Stop Believing, I promise you.
And you learn so much in that. Like that's the GC work that, you know, you mentioned. Like
totally.
You learn those skills and they come home with you, and you apply them in different places, and you never know how the cross training of life is going to prepare you.
Sure. But again, like you identified an interest, right? And then you chased it, right? But I feel like the whole, you know, part of the struggle in life is you know, I don't know the finances behind, but like identifying, trying to figure out how to make something lucrative, right? How can I take playing the guitar and make money on it? Mm-hmm. Not to say that we need to make $2 million a year, but like, how can I live off of playing music?
Yeah.
You know, and I feel like that's the struggle in, you know, starting any business. But I don't know, man, I have a theory that like, you know, if Jeff Bezos wasn't doing Amazon, he'd be doing something else. If Elon Musk, I mean, I guess he's controversial right now, but like if
he's in all those things though. It's like he's pursued his own mind in that kind of way. And you know what? That first wedding that we worked together, I was sitting there with one of the bandmates in that group that I don't get to chat with her much. She's a trumpet player. and she makes clothes outside of playing music. And I said, would you ever do like an Etsy or something like that for that kind of thing? She goes, no, I've already monetized one of my passions. I'm going to leave that one just to be for me. And I'm like, that's a stroke of brilliance in such a different way, you know? Like, find something that you love doing and find out how it's going to lead you to a life that you want to be living.
Yeah.
But you don't have to take everything to the marketplace.
Yeah.
But if you find something you can, you know, we all need subsistence in life, whether that's a roof over your head, food in your mouth, or cash in your wallet. Like, you got to get somewhere.
Sure.
So finding something that makes you passionate about life so that you can have these other things in your reserve that just feed your soul, that compensate you differently is so huge.
Yeah. Wow. I never really thought about it. Yeah. I mean, I guess I still have some hobbies. Like I like watching mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
I don't think I want to fight. You
Okay.
know, those
Do
guys
you practice at all? Do you
I've
go
done
roll?
jujitsu.
Okay.
You know, I'll take boxing classes.
Shit scares me, man.
Yeah.
You
There's
know?
some wild.
There's some wild shit on there.
Yeah. But I guess it's good, right? To like, I have 2 full blown like businesses, but at the same time, I don't have time to start a third one. I don't think.
Yeah.
You know. But
Well, what's it like to manage a social life with this kind of thing, where you spend more hours than most people put in their
that's a really good
40-hour week
question.
job?
So yeah, not married. I'm probably one of the few friends that I just recently started dating somebody, and she seems awesome. But I've wondered if that's part of it, you know, right? Because her and I were actually just talking about this. Like, I think it was yesterday. I just sat here and thought, like, if people followed me for a day, right, and just kind of like watch the weird stuff I do in a work day, they'd be like, what the hell? Like, I literally wake up, I got to go to the bank, you know, I got to meet somebody to sign a lease, they give me cash. Well, unfortunately, I got to go to the bank again. I go back to the building. I just went to there's a pack of screws I need. So it's like, I literally don't stop doing stuff all day long.
That's why they call you squirrel, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, but to me, it's the way my body moves. Like, my brain works that way. I just want to move. Sometimes sitting down to editing a film can be a struggle for me because, you know, to hyper focus on one screen for 6 hours can be tough.
Yeah.
But social life, I do well with friends. I have a dinner tomorrow night with one of my oldest friends. We literally went to grade school together. One of my best friends just moved back into town. He's a general surgeon, so he, for like 10 years, dude, was living all over the United States, you know, getting educated and doing his fellowship. And he just moved back, and like we picked up where we left off, you know?
Yeah.
I do a good job at making sure that when I do have free time, I don't lay around.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it is like, I can't remember the last time I hung out other than like a Sunday watching football.
Yeah.
I'm always doing something, or I'm at the gym, or, and so, I mean, I don't know. It's a, you know, this idea, you know, behind like equal, you want everybody in the world to like have the same, right? And obviously it's a capitalist economy. Sure, like I hope everybody like does well and is comfortable and has the things they need. You don't want anybody to be homeless or to need food, but it's like equal output is not a thing, right? Like, I don't know if I'm ahead or behind of most of the people in my peer group. I'd like to think I'm ahead financially, or but like that's because like I've been doing what I'm doing every day for 9 years, like just running around and taking a risk on this building, and so I don't know. I guess I have some people sometimes, you know, not to like talk down on any, but like there's people that only do my one job, and that's a full job for them.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say that maybe they spend more time on that one job. Obviously they do than I do, but like for me, that one job, it wasn't enough. Like I just have a whole different thing, and I had a whole different engine, and but I'll be honest, like running those 2 jobs, there's days where I think like I have to go work out because like it's fucking me up.
Yeah.
You know, like,
But then at 2 jobs, you do say that's enough, and like, I always tell people like it's a line between ambition and contentment that we all need to find for ourselves, but no one else can describe that for you. That's why we are all individuals out here, and individual freedoms are important, so you can go the distance you want to go. Like with my fiance, she's the only person that I'm gonna sit around and kick it with in that kind of a way, because that's our space, and she's turned me on to enjoying that aspect of it. But with other people, like I'm going to fidget the whole time, like I must go, and it's nice to be able to tell that person like you were the only exception for this in me, because this other part is me. I couldn't turn off my need to go write a song or to go play a gig or to go see a show. It's like, in that aspect, I am insatiable. but you learn and you balance for you and other people's judgments of that. Fuck them, you know.
How old are you?
26.
Okay, so I'm young. I'm older than you. I'm 34. So, well, cool, man. That yeah. So I don't know. It's just I mean, I'm trying to think of. Oh, I mean, I've got all types of wild stories. So there's a guy named Larry that works for me.
Seems ideal.
Yeah, and so it's kind of this is the kind of guy I am. I was dating a girl in Nashville. Girl I knew from a long time ago. Actually met her making a video. She was a model that like worked in this video. We just stayed in touch, but it kind of never matched up. She was never single. I was never single, and we just kind of were always interested from afar, but we never dated. And
Good things to have in life, though.
yeah,
You know?
yeah. And she reached out one time, was like, "Hey, I'm single." Literally, like she sent me a text, "Hey, I'm single. How are you?" You know, and
Nice.
yeah, it's like good. I forgot you existed.
Yeah,
so
but
anyway,
that's probably the kind of person you are, where it's like, hey, I'm at a bank and I need some. You know, it's like be forward with what you want in this life. Here comes an opportunity.
totally. And so anyway, I was handed an opportunity, right? And it at the time, it was, Nashville's not close, but I was like, fuck it, I'll drive down there and take her to dinner, and just see how she's been, and if anything, I have a good conversation, and
Yeah.
go down, and we hit it off, just like I thought we would. Attractive girl, had her own place, and I was like, and so anyway, literally, I don't know, if it was a month or so into dating. I was just driving around one night with her, and there was a guy on the side of the road pushing a shopping cart that had a bunch of stuff in it, and he was clearly homeless. And for some reason, I was just like, man, we should help this guy. I have no idea why, but I had a truck. I was driving a truck, which is my main car, and pulled over, and I said, hey, dude, where are you taking everything? He said, oh, I'm actually just living underneath this bridge, but, he looked exhausted. And come to find out what he was doing is there was a hotel that was not far from where he was staying. Actually, it was pretty far. It was like a couple miles. And they would throw I actually went there with him. They would they would renovate a hotel room, and they would throw like a brand new 60-inch TV in the dumpster. Like literally,
So you're like, okay, noted. I'm coming back here, but let's
yeah,
talk. What's it?
So anyway, this guy was going there and getting mattresses, and I mean, these like shit they were throwing away would look like super nice, So that's where he was going. He was going to get stuff, and he was on his way back, but it was a trek, And so I don't know why, dude, but I put this guy in my truck, put his stuff in the back of my truck, in my bed, and I drove him to where he was going, and we just started talking. And he's like, I wasn't scared of him physically, right? I would kick this dude's ass if I had to. So
Yeah.
it's different than like a girl picking him up, right?
Yeah, well, it gives, you have a confidence in that, so you're willing to go out and be vulnerable because
Sure.
you're not that vulnerable.
I had no physical fear of this guy. He looked, he was, kind of a scrawny older guy. And I'm like, man, this guy's struggling. He needs a person, whatever. And so I pulled over, helped him out, drove him to where he was living, which is literally under a bridge. And part of me was like, I was a wild kid growing up, and I used to like hang out in the woods for like literally months. Like I was a woods kid, right? I grew up in the woods. I had forts, and I would light fires, and I was like kind of a gnarly. I was a boy, hardcore boy. And so part of me was just like curious, like, well, what is it like? What does it look like living underneath a bridge, And so I fucking helped him start carrying his stuff underneath the bridge, and I was like looking at the stuff this guy built. I'll send you the news did a story on it. It's wild.
Yeah.
So I'm like looking at the stuff this guy built, and he like went around to dumpsters in the area and took like insulation panels, and like he built himself like a legitimate house underneath this bridge, right? And I'm looking at all this, and I'm like, fuck, this guy's like, here's the thing. It wasn't that it was like pristine work, but it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, man, this guy fucking works, And I don't know why. I was like, hey, I was staying with her, but I was like, look, dude, I'll come back tomorrow, and I'll help you buy some tools you need. So I like went to her. I got his number. He had a cell phone that he had. That was just like a little daily phone or monthly phone. So I came back the next day, took him to Home Depot, and I bought him like 10 cheeseburgers at McDonald's, and I bought him a handsaw, I think a hammer. He had like zero tools, right? So I don't know if when he was like hammering stuff, he was just using a rock or what, but I was like, man, just a couple tools would like make your life way easier.
Totally.
So I bought him some tools, and then like it spurred from like that to me buying him tools to thinking like, should I bring this guy to Cincinnati for a week? And so I knew I was coming back the next weekend. So I called him Sunday, and I'm like, you want to come to Cincinnati for a week? And, so here's the thing, my life is overwhelming. Just as I was talking about how like I needed a guy, right? I needed a guy that was in between the $50 an hour carpenter,
Yeah.
right, and the street guy that I had been hiring. But before I go find him, I got to call 8 baby mamas that I have in my phone. I mean, like, I got
Yeah.
guys. A guy
You need
named
someone dependable that's
Literally.
reasonable.
Yeah,
you
I got
know?
a guy named Ronnie that I've used for a long time. I haven't seen him in a minute, but like at one time I had more than 10 numbers in my phone that were for Ronnie. And like I was calling uncles, baby mamas, like old jobs just to try to find this guy. And it was every time I wanted him.
Yeah.
And I had to go pick him up. Like it was always a thing. But, you know, he served a purpose in the sense that like, you know, what it would cost to hire him and what I needed done, it worked, you know. And so I was like, man, this could be a guy that is like, you know, always around. Like this could be my guy. He's got some skills. And so, dude, I fucking picked him up Sunday, drove him back to Cincinnati. Was like living in the basement of one of my buildings for the first couple nights. And the first thing he and I ever did is we went to my building on Main Street and we built a tool shop. I had a shop, but I needed shelves. And so I was like, man, I went and bought a bunch of wood and I was just like, let's see if this guy can like do anything,
Yeah.
you know? And then I started talking to him and, you know, the more time you spend around somebody, especially if they're not a total fucking weirdo, is like, I started to like care for him and he had some skills, but a lot of his skills were like way in the back of his mind. It had been a long time since he had built stuff, but his family had like an asphalt company. He had built highways. He had a past in construction, but it had been a while since he like dusted off these skills. So, so anyway, like it was like he would work Monday through Friday with me. I'd take him back, put him under the bridge for the weekend, and I would, you know, hang out with that girl. And then I'd pick him back up again on Sunday. And we did that for a couple weeks. And then finally, her and I broke up and I just kept him.
Dude, that's...
Yeah. So he's been here 2 years.
That's incredible.
He's got his own house. He's got his own car.
Got his own house?
Oh, yeah. We got him a house he rents. And I mean, he's got a bunch of money. People don't, I mean, I don't want to say. But
well,
like,
yeah, but still, you know, like we were talking about earlier, your investment in people as a crazy
people
star
skills,
what?
though, man.
Well, and you reached out to someone and said, let me arm you with some of the tools that I use in my life to better what I do.
Yeah.
And in that, you found a partner. And in that, he found a life.
Yeah.
You know, like what a miraculous thing.
Yeah.
And how fucking funny is that for this chick where she's like, I don't know if he's coming to kick it with me or Larry anymore.
yeah,
and turns out it was Larry.
Yeah.
You know, it's like she gets jumped and he keeps getting picked
but
up.
Why? I don't know. Like, I'm not a big religious guy. I grew up religious, but like, why did this girl reach out to me, right? Why did I go down there? Why were we on that road? Why did I see him? Why did he like need a life? I had a construction business, right? So he ended up, it's kind of a long story how he became homeless, but he was looking for work. He originally went to Cleveland, and then somebody in Cleveland, this is prime COVID, somebody in Cleveland told him that there was work down in Nashville. He came to Nashville, couldn't find work, and pretty much just ended up under a bridge.
And then just, you know, then you're just trying to survive.
Totally, you know, and then I don't know, it's just weird how like, I don't know, like this girl, her and I, you know, have nothing in common anymore. I think she's married now and probably has kids, but like she, like our brief connection introduced me to a guy that is a huge part of my life now.
Yeah.
Works for us full time. I guarantee right now, Larry's at work. I
Yeah.
guarantee it, you know, because I just left him. But like the crazy thing is I learned a lot about homelessness too. Like this dude has a better work ethic than some of these guys I have that have mortgages in Anderson Township.
Yeah.
Like, and he was living under a bridge, dude. And it's just crazy. I mean, there's a multitude of reasons why he was, but it's kind of a wild story. So the news, Channel 12 did a story on it and had all these people reach out to me like, dude, that is the coolest thing ever. And I don't know, but that's the kind of guy I am, man. I do wild stuff. I take chances.
Yeah. I want to meet Larry now, man. Like, sounds like a dope dude.
Yeah, you'll come see the
Cool.
new building.
I would love that.
Yeah, he's at work right now, and he's a super reliable dude. He's got some quirks to him. It's amazing. He's got like amazing construction knowledge, but there's some stuff socially that like he like gets catfished by these girls online, and
Totally.
it's amazing to me that like he can like build a highway. But when I show him this picture, he's showing me this picture of this girl. I'm like, Larry, come on, that girl wouldn't date me.
But you can turn him on to some of these things that do escape him. Like you can stop other people from falling in the same pits as you, as treating them like the individual that you were when you were learning that. You know,
Totally.
in this person, you probably see a little bit of the 24-year-old kid that didn't know any of these tasks until they needed to know them. And then not only does he build the shelf, you find out he has all these other skills.
Yeah.
And he becomes your go-to guy. Like that's really a great testament to, we grew up in a kind of Catholic environment. Like the Catholic Church is going to teach you, like, you should see the Savior in everybody that you look at.
Sure.
The same opportunity for greatness.
I chose to see good in somebody, like, until they proved me. And Larry doesn't have a perfect past, but here's the thing: everything I saw around him, right, was like I chose to think, show me, I chose to see like awesome in him until he proved to me, like, dude, as soon as he stole something from me, as soon as he, would, let my dog not tell me he's taking the dog out and then not, and then my dog goes to the bathroom all over my, like, that's different. But like everything he ever said he was going to do for me, he followed through.
Yeah.
And he knows he had the keys to all my cars. He knows how to get in my house. He knows I collect watches. Like, he's my dude.
He could come after you, but you've let him in that regard.
Correct.
And imagine, there's a lot of us that have a hard time expressing what things mean to us, what people mean to you. If that guy could sum it up perfectly in 2 sentences, I'm sure he would. But what you mean to him as a friend is probably insurmountable to what he could ever tell you.
Yeah. Dude, I've done some. So this is funny. This is just kind of on the front of my mind. So what kind of dude am I? We used to have pet alligators. I don't know if this is wild.
That's some hillbilly shit. What are you doing out there?
Yeah. So when I was in college, we used to drive past this store. It was called the House of Tropics, and they used to sell alligators. And so I walked in one day. I was like 19 years old, and I was living in a college house. I think I was probably 19. It was my sophomore year. And bought an alligator, and then this is crazy. My roommate ended up wanting one. His name's Kevin. He died in a motorcycle accident, which is sad, but he ended up buying one. And then in our freaking family room of our college house was literally an alligator tank. Okay, so we had 2 alligators in there, and anyway, long story short, these alligators eventually we would just let them run around the house. Like we'd have parties, and but they were like nice. Like,
don't tell me they're nice. They're prehistoric.
They are
carnivores.
Legit dinosaurs.
Yes, they have a brain stem that you can't even imagine how good it is at killing.
Yeah,
which maybe you do too, but not compared to that.
But they were
guy.
little, right? So when we got them, they're like little lizards, right? They were. I have pictures, but they were about. I don't know. They were freaking 10
Okay, by the time they're walking around the party, they 2 feet?
They got big.
Woo!
Yeah, they got big. And then it became a problem where they were getting too big.
Like a size of a container thing, they grow to whatever.
Exactly. And so when we ended up we knew this guy named Chris who had a guy in his neighborhood that had a buddy down in Georgia that was a reptile guy. And so we packaged them, and he sent them to his buddy. He had like a legit farm.
Yeah.
Okay. I forgot about these things for 15 years.
Well, so I want to conclude today's episode with you telling people who you are in summation, where to find you. But let me say before, this has been fucking nuts, brother. And clearly you are too, in the greatest way. So thank you for coming on and sharing this.
I've never been on a podcast. Never told anybody wild
Come
stuff.
back next week. I don't whenever. You know?
Yeah. So anyway, long story short, we had these alligators. We sent them down to Georgia, and then I'm sitting on my couch, like, I don't know, 3 months ago. My buddy Trevor, who lived in the house, he sent me a video, and he was like, "No fucking way." And there was a Barstool Sensi post of an alligator down in Georgia. It's thing's fucking huge. It's probably 15 feet long. It's a full-blown alligator. And they're like, yeah, this alligator used to live in Cincinnati in a frat house. And so we're like, so anyway, we're like,
what was its name?
We had a Larry and a Sprinkles. Yeah, but Larry, right? Sprinkles was one, yeah.
What's wrong with you sadistic frat boys?
We're wild. But so anyway, we weren't even a fraternity. They called it a frat house, but it was just like 5 lacrosse kids living together.
Okay.
But this fucking alligator, it has to be my alligator, dude. We did the math. We did the math, and we're like, man, it's that old, right? It's from Cincinnati, Ohio. It seems to be like where we sent it, and we're sitting here thinking like, it's just a hilarious story, right?
Yeah.
And so I have to send you that too, but I don't know, dude. My parents, I put them through it. They gave up on me in the sense that like I was going to school, I got good grades, I was a good athlete. They were just kind of like, just don't poke him. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know. I think a part of that is like kind of how I am today. Like I would just see stuff and I go after it. I don't know. I mean, paralysis by analysis is a challenge for some people, right? There's too many people out there that, not naming it, but I have a friend that he kind of renovates buildings where I live. But when I say kind of, like I've done like 6 in the amount of time he's done half of one. And it's just like, he sits there and he wants to like read about this and, you know, check interest rates. And dude, I've built up the buildings and, you know, fucking looked at them and scribbled on my notepad 3 numbers. And I'm like, fucking, I'm buying it, you know? And like, it hasn't ever gone wrong for me. It could, right?
Yeah.
If I didn't really know what I was doing. But like there's other people, man, where it's like they got to talk to their uncle about he used to own a rental home and he rented to college kids. And next thing I know, you talk yourself out of an opportunity, you know? And I don't give myself the ability to do that. You know, so anyway, I have Stu now, who's a lot more conservative than I am, and he'll keep us on the right track. But like, I don't know. I feel like the goal in life, man, is to chase something you're interested in, but to also, you know, if you're not doing something that doesn't scare you, then you're not doing it. You know.
Amen, brother.
Yeah.
Let's end it on that. Where can they find you?
So I got an Instagram. I think it's at Mike. Basch, Basch,
cool.
Which is my name, Mike Basch. But that's really the only social media that I use is Instagram, and
it's a damn good page, though.
Thanks.
And it was nice to see that these videos are going to be on there since we didn't get to them today. Because I was
Cool.
showing my fiance this, she goes, "Show me the next one."
Yeah,
and I was
cool.
like, "Honey, like, no, I'm going to watch these tomorrow." She's like, "Show me the next one."
Yeah.
It's like we were watching this full thing last night.
Yeah.
It's like it really is incredible, and your video editing is great. You know, you feel the progression, you feel the sweat put into that without
Yeah.
having to do it, which is what a lot of people need to get off their ass, to stop questioning, to start doing that.
I mean, the difference, like, you know, my actual professional videos that I make for weddings and the amount of time that I spend on those are very different. Obviously, you can see that I kind of know what I'm doing, but wedding films I spend a lot more time on, and they're a lot more, you know, a lot more in depth. But yeah, it's I probably should have a page for each business, but it's just a hybrid. It's a hybrid of like, you know,
You on a
sometimes
steel beam with a nice narration of what the fuck's going on.
Yeah.
I watched this. I was like, how did he get up there? You know?
Sometimes I'm doing that stuff. Sometimes I'm at this Friday. I'll be at a fancy wedding.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people are interested in me, because it's like I'm a weird. I got a weird life where it's like I'm living 2 completely different stories.
You are extremely unique. You are just yourself, bro.
Cool.
So thank you so much for coming on, Mike. Appreciate you, bro. Yeah.
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Basch, what a dude! What an odd variety of stories, but you know that's the way people are. We come from backgrounds and places that have zero to do with where our trajectory takes us, and that guy's definitely following his trajectory. So much respect. Thanks for coming on, brother. In conclusion, it's time to talk about the dates. I want to give a very big thank you to everyone that gave me a gig this year, came to a gig, listened to a song. It all matters a ton to me. I counted, I barely counted, and I think I'm around 275 gigs for 2022. So it is a pleasure to do it. Thank you so much for the opportunity, my friends. Without further ado, let me show you what I got coming up on the schedule. Here we go. Scrolling. Tonight we are at Latitude for the Monday's Muse. My featured guest is going to be Miss Megan Wren. We're also going to have Max Gears, Tommy Lee, and Mila Nieberhaus. So please come see the show. It starts at 7 o'clock. It's going to be kicking. This Wednesday night, I'm going to Indianapolis. I'll be back at the Tin Roof starting at 9 p.m. I had a great time with my man Nick Meehan that last week there, so come check out the show, solo acoustic. Thursday, we are going to be at the Cincy Tin Roof for what we call a Tin Roof Sticky Christmas. I'll let that be as enticing as you want it to be. Get your ass down there. Friday night, we're going to be rocking Jeff Ruby's Steakhouse. It's a classy time. You can't get a reservation, but there's like 20 seats at the bar, I've been told. So risk it. Come on down. Check out the tunes. Next Wednesday, I'm back at the Tin Roof. Little Miami next Thursday, solo acoustic. And then I am wrapping up the year at Jeff Ruby's on December 30th. So thank you so much again for the support, the love, everybody. Thanks for watching the show. And take care this week. Enjoy the people you enjoy the most. Peace.